Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Walworth in South London to Clapham. This ride takes about 20 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes between 25 minutes and half an hour, so it makes a lot of sense to cycle this route. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on the corner of Brandon Street and Browning Street in Walworth, and we're going to head west right towards Walworth Road, which is the main high street in this town. This first section of the route is dead quiet, and you'll see why that is when we get a little bit further down. There are actually some planters here and no entry signs blocking off the road to cars, which keeps it all really quiet. Note the traffic light here, which is green. If it were red, we'd have to wait there, and it helps us cross Walworth Road onto the other side here. It's a similar story on the western side of Walworth Road. It's all really quiet, and it's for the same reason, and that's because the area that we're in is actually a Southwark Council low traffic neighbourhood, so through traffic has basically been removed from the streets around here with a load of strategic road closures. Sometimes that means planters like the ones we saw a second ago, sometimes it means bollards like other physical road closures, and sometimes it can mean signage like this bus gate coming up here. You see this blue sign, it says buses and cycles only. So that stops cars, but it allows a bus route to pass through here, and if you think about it, that's totally compatible with having a sort of pleasant low traffic cycle route, because even a frequent bus route might have a bus, you know, once every 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something like that. But one car going down a street every 3 or 4 minutes, that's a very low traffic street. So actually having that bus route through there, it really doesn't make it a worse place to cycle. And it's also a thing that we don't talk about enough. I think these low traffic neighbourhoods, they can often be a positive if they're designed right. They can be a positive for public transport, as they can include measures like that, bus priority measures, which can give people faster journeys if they're taking the bus. So it's not just about walking and cycling and making the place nicer, but it's also about improving reliability of public transport. And you can see just how quiet the streets around here are. And believe it or not, this was actually filmed at rush hour on a weekday, so this is about as busy as it gets. Now we're going to cut right here through Kennington Park, and a very specific part of Kennington Park. This is actually called the Midnight Path, and the reason for that is that the rest of Kennington Park is closed off at sundown, but this Midnight Path is open at all hours, 24 hours, so there's always a 24-hour cycle route to cut through here, hence the name. But next there's a bit coming up that I'm really not that sure about. So we've got this great protected cycle lane here. It's separated from Kennington Park Road by a step, but we're actually gonna have to turn right, and as you can probably guess, this is quite tricky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the bus lane for a bit, which has no traffic in it, and then I'm gonna wait for a gap in the traffic. I'm gonna turn, I'm just gonna sit here for a second while the traffic moves out, and then I'm gonna go across in the gap and turn into McGee Street. Now that right turn is really not ideal at all, and there are a couple of alternatives to what I did there. One is that you could use the protected cycle lane on the other side of the street, and you'd be cycling the wrong way down that cycle lane. It's probably not a good idea. I don't really recommend it. Another is that you could have kept going until you got to the junction, you know, about 30 seconds later, and you could have basically done a U-turn at that junction. It's a bit fiddly, probably wouldn't do that. Another is that you could use the pedestrian crossing, dismount and simply walk your bike for that section, which is a shame because there's a good protected cycle lane there. I think what I did is probably the right thing. It's certainly the legal thing to do. You know, McGee Street is no entry except for cycles, but it's not great. I'd be really interested to hear people's opinions of how you deal with crossings like that. I think ideally, if you were to fix this, you'd put a two-way cycle track, like the one we're on now actually, on the other side of the road. So people would be able to access that street without turning across traffic. I think really when a road gets as wide as Kennington Park Road like that, you really do need to have two-way tracks, ideally on both sides, but certainly on one side, and have that side accessible from all side streets. Now, if you're familiar with the geography of the route we're doing, or if you just looked carefully at the map at the beginning, you'll see that really ideally we would have loved to have just gone straight down Kennington Park Road, which is the A3. And that would have taken us directly to Clapham. And in fact, there is technically a signed cycle route down there. There's Cycle Superhighway 7 in air quotes. Unfortunately, it mostly lacks infrastructure for most of the way, so it's mostly just paint on the road, and it's quite a big road. So it's not the sort of road that most people would like to cycle on without infrastructure. So what we're doing at the moment is we're actually picking a route through back streets that pretty much parallels the A3. Most of this route, which is pretty direct, there are a few corners, but it's pretty direct, is through low traffic neighbourhoods or streets that have been filtered, and you can see just how many people there are riding bikes here. There are probably about 10 people on bikes that we pass for every person we pass in a car. I think that's a fair assessment. It really is, at this time in the rush hour on a normal weekday in this part of London. This is really the main mode of transport. That's kind of the mix of different transports that you get. You see at the lights there, there's sort of about 5 people on a bike, 1 car. Same in this direction. Now, the backstreet route that we're following is called Cycleway 5, and you can actually follow it without a map. All you need to do is watch out for those green and blue signs and the markings on the road with arrows that will basically point you in the right direction. But if you do feel that you need extra help finding your way, then don't forget you can always download a map of the route in the description below the video. It's a link to a website called Komoot, and it will give you a GPX map of the directions you need to go, and you should be able to load that onto whatever app or device you choose to use. But as I say, the wayfinding on Cycleway 5 is actually pretty good. You can see it says C5 on the floor right there, and actually once we're onto Larkhall Lane here, it's pretty much just straight. It's actually quite fast. Now, Larkhall Lane, and this turns later into Larkhall Rise, is actually an interesting street. Whenever I've been down here, it's this quiet, and don't forget this is the morning rush hour, and there's plenty of people riding bikes past us. You can just see just how popular a cycle route it actually is. But I have been told by people who ride down here in the evening rush hour that it can actually get a little bit busier, especially when there's disruption on nearby roads and drivers decide to go down here to bypass the queuing. Now, that is possible for them to do because this isn't actually a low traffic neighbourhood. It does have some through routes for cars still through it. There is one big closure at the end which eliminates most of the through traffic, and we'll get to that in a second. It's over a railway bridge. But I think Lambeth Council should really finish the job around here and close the remaining through routes and make this a proper watertight low traffic neighbourhood, if that's really a problem in the evening rush hour, as some people say it is. And that closure that we were talking about is just here. You can see these no entry signs on the railway bridge, and there are similar no entry signs on the other side as well. So this is effectively a filter. Interestingly, the name Larkhall is not actually derived from Larkhall in Lanarkshire in Scotland, a place that you might be familiar with if you know your UK geography well. It's actually named after Lark Hall, which was a stately home in the area back in the day. Another point of historical interest on this street is this slightly larger building with the arched windows on our right. That was the Clapham dispensary, which provided medical care to the poor. It was built in 1854, and on our right is an excellent pub called the Bread and Roses. Believe it or not, that's I think the only trade union owned pub in the country. It's run by the local trade union council. It's also pretty good value. The pints aren't too expensive, and as of 2023 you can get a veggie hot dog there for £5.50, which I think is pretty good as far as pub food goes, considering how much you can pay in some establishments these days. This section of the route is reasonably quiet, although it does suffer from some problems with through traffic, especially on roads like this Venn Street, where the parking makes the carriageway very narrow. Ideally on streets like this, I think you'd only have parking on one side of the road, as it does make it quite difficult to get past, especially when there's a car coming the other way. Venn Street, by the way, was named after John Venn, Reverend John Venn of the evangelical Clapham sect, who preached in the church ahead of us there, and his grandson, also called John Venn, invented the Venn diagram, which you'll probably be familiar with. But we have made it right to Clapham, and thanks so much for watching that, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I do post videos like this every single week, and I've got a pretty good streak going as well. I haven't missed a week in a while. Thanks again so much to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd also like to contribute as well, you can find a link in the description below the video. Thank you to those of you who already do so. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments about what you think of the video, particularly about that weird right turn, and also what sort of routes you'd like to see in future videos, that kind of thing. Let me know below, and I will see you guys all next time.